Good evening. On a night of major developments on many fronts in the impeachment inquiry, we begin tonight with the one that eclipses them all and could fundamentally change the course of this entire affair. Today, one of the president's top advisors openly admitted what he, the president, and all the president's people have been denying for weeks now. And now he's trying to back away from what he said in great detail several times and not by accident. Right now, acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney is furiously backpedaling from it all, which only underscores the gravity of what he said. Today, presumably with the president's approval, he told the public, told lawmakers pursuing impeachment, told the world that yes, the administration withheld military aid from an ally under Russian attack to get that country to take action to help the president politically. Mick Mulvaney admitted there was a quid pro quo with Ukraine. He didn't use those words, quid pro quo, but what he describes was just that. And then he said this.
I have news for everybody. Get over it. There's going to be political influence in foreign policy.
Get over it, he said, followed by a half-truth suggesting that we're all just a little naive for somehow being surprised, equating what happened with the normal diplomatic give and take between countries, which this is not. This appears to be for personal gain. After all, if this were normal, it's hard to see why the White House has been trying fruitlessly now to stop all the participants in this scheme from testifying about it to Congress. Another key player, by the way, Ambassador Gordon Sondland, went before lawmakers today. But even as he was talking, so was Mick Mulvaney. Now, here's the first key moment from Mulvaney's press conference.
So the demand for an investigation into the Democrats was part of the reason that he ordered to withhold funding to Ukraine.
The look back to what happened in 2016 certainly was part of the thing that he was worried about in corruption with that nation. And that is absolutely appropriate.
The funding.
2016 refers to that conspiracy theory the president's latched onto, which blames Ukraine and the Democrats, not Russia, for interference in the last presidential election. Now, what Mulvaney just spelled out there is the exchange of something for something, or the now familiar Latin equivalent.
But to be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happened as well.
We do that all the time with foreign policy.
Oh, okay. Well, there it was. The president's acting chief of staff speaking for the president, talking about the very first thing the president brought up on that July 25th phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, immediately after Zelensky asked about the military aid that they so desperately needed that was being held up. Mick Mulvaney agreeing that what transpired on that call, what he, Rudy Giuliani, Vice President Pence, Mike Pompeo, and a cast of recently indicted accused felons were involved with for months was the very thing in the very words that the president and others said it was not.
You take a look at that call. It was perfect. I didn't do it. There was no quid pro quo.
This has turned into a full-blown threat, a full-blown quid pro quo, and I just don't see it.
This phone call is a nothing burger in terms of a quid pro quo.
And there was never any quid pro quo.
There's no quid pro quo.
No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo.
There is no pro quo.
Or no pro quo. Today, Mick Mulvaney admitted, well, yeah, there was. Again, didn't use those words, but the situation he described, which he said, get over it, is a quid pro quo. And he tried to suggest that there was nothing wrong with it. Admitting it, nothing wrong with admitting it, because it just happens all the time. Now, keeping him honest, it's hard to see that as anything but BS, because tonight, as we said, he is now furiously backpedaling away from what he said earlier, a recognition that speaking what appears to be the truth is terrible for this president. So having made those disastrous remarks, he is now trying to unsay what he said. He released a statement reading in part, let me be clear, there was absolutely no quid pro quo between Ukrainian military aid and any investigation into the 2016 election. The latest word from Mick Mulvaney in hopes, perhaps, of erasing the previous latest word, which we'll play again for you now.
But to be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happened as well.
We do that all the time with foreign policy.
And again, he said we should get over it. And perhaps he already has. David, once again, the White House saying, believe us, not what you see, what you hear. But Mulvaney's comments, I mean, they are on tape. He's saying reporters misconstrued them. He answered directly Jonathan Karl's question about it.
That's right, Anderson. And I've had a chance to go back before he made the pivot, before he issued the later statement, to check out the websites of 8 major publications. How did they interpret his original press conference and what he said? All eight unanimously agreed that he said that there was a quid pro quo. And it basically, this is done all the time in foreign policy, get over it. And that clearly, so clearly this is not fake news, which is what their claim is. That this is all just a made-up conspiracy to hurt the White House. He clearly acknowledged that. He clearly then was under instructions from others, including the president, to walk it back. He's tried, but I think most people will walk away saying, yeah, the walk back didn't really succeed because he said the truth the first time.
Yeah, Gloria, the thing is, Mulvaney had multiple opportunities to clean up the comments in the briefing room. He was asked repeatedly about the admitted quid pro quo, and he didn't.
No, he didn't. I mean, look, he was adopting sort of the Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump strategy, which is kind of, yeah, we did it, but so what? There's nothing wrong with it. You know, it's done all the time. Get over it, folks. And let me just read you something. It's so stunning that he would take it back. It's a little like Alice through the looking glass, because here's what he said. Did the president mention to me in passing the corruption related to the DNC server? Absolutely. No question about that. That's it. And that's why we held up the money. Period. End of sentence.
Yeah. So
the DOJ interpreted that way and backed away from what he said, saying that's news to us. The president's attorneys, Jay Sekulow, backed away from that, saying, well, he didn't consult with us before he said this. So everybody heard it the same way.
Can I just point out why this matters? I mean, you know, this is not just some like gotcha thing because we all want to like get something on the chief of staff. Here we have congressionally appropriated money. Congress says, give this money to the Ukrainians.
Taxpayer money.
Taxpayer money. And what the White House has done and what they admitted today was you only get the money if you help us win the election, not because you help us national security, international relations. The only thing we want from you is help to defeat Democrats. That is wrong. That's why this matters.
And what Mulvaney is claiming is that our interest in finding about the server and that Ukraine and was really behind the hacks of the DNC, not Russia. Mulvaney is claiming, Jeff, that that's all about corruption in Ukraine when it's not at all. It's about a benefit for the president.
Right.
Well, that's right. Out of all the things you could talk about, and Ukraine certainly has corruption problems, the only thing they're talking about is this weird obsession with this fake story about the 2016 election. Now, I do think, in fairness, I should say, that Mulvaney lied about the Biden side of things.
Oh, of course
I think he clearly lied about that because we have that from the president's own mouth in the partial transcript that what they really wanted was dirt to use, not about 2016. What they really wanted was dirt to use against Joe Biden today.
And Gloria, the reason he lied about that is because he knows that is incredibly damning. I mean, you can't even find me dirt on Joe Biden as anti-corruption in Ukraine. It's just, and the president, by the way, hasn't done Mulvaney any favors on that by going out and again calling for Ukraine to investigate the Bidens and China too.
China. Look, and so Mulvaney, in a way, didn't even have to say that because the president, we have the summary of his phone conversation in which he said, what Biden has done is terrible and, you ought to do me a favor, though, I think the phrase was. And so Mulvaney today was probably in his press availability telling the truth about what the president had said, what the problem was about, crowd strike and all the rest, and that they wanted Ukrainians to look into corruption. He called it a look back. But I think we would all agree that there's a look back to 2016 component and there's a look ahead to 2020.
Sure.